Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Nick Robin, and last time I left you, it was 4th of July, and I want to start with that, and I just feel like 4th of July, like New Year's Eve, like Christmas Day are just the most overhyped holidays out there, and you're always expecting this amazing time. When it comes to New Year's Eve and 4th of July, you want everything to go right. You want to be with all your boys or your gals. And it's just hard to plan everything because not everyone wants to do the same thing. And it just causes so much unnecessary stress. I know. First world problems here. So I know there's a lot more important things going on in the world than what you're doing for the 4th of July or New Year's Eve. But sometimes it's just better to go with the flow, meet up with a couple of your good buddies and kind of just see where the day goes, because my 4th of July, as always, was a shit show. We started down in North County, San Diego, at one of my buddies' house, laid by the pool. Tried to get an Uber to go down down south, and Jesus Christ, Ubers were ridiculous. I mean, it's a couple things. First off, it's 4th of July. Secondly, COVID. So the chances of getting an Uber are even less likely because everyone who drives for Uber or Lyft is over the age of 50 typically. So they're all staying inside trying to not get COVID. So prices, it took us, long story short, it took about 30 minutes to get an Uber. But nonetheless, another great 4th of July as always. They didn't say fireworks were going to happen, but hey, they happened anyways. Probably not legally. So today I will be taking a look at the teams not invited to Orlando and which of those teams hold the brightest future. Then we'll be discussing the closest thing to professional basketball going on in the country right now. And on Nick's picks, the greatest rappers of all time. But first, an update from Orlando, just days before the teams are supposed to report. So let's start with on Sunday, Sacramento became the seventh NBA team to shut down its practice facility due to COVID, joining the Bucks, Clippers, Heat, Nuggets, Nets, and Suns. So things aren't going so well right now. And really, I mean, what's going to happen? What's really going to change once we get to Orlando? I mean, I know this bubble is probably a little bit safer, but what are the chances that all 22 teams, all 15 or so players from each team, along with all the staff members, actually practice these safety precautions? Because, I mean, you can control maybe a group of 10, but you can't control a group of about a couple hundred. So I'm looking like Orlando's already on its way to being a huge disaster. But again, we'll see how things work out when we get there. But, I mean, what happens once one person tests positive? Is the whole season just shut down? Because if one person contracts COVID in that bubble, that basically contaminates the whole bubble. And do we really think players aren't going to be on Hinge or Tinder or Bumble or whatever app they're on these days trying to get some ass while they're sitting in these hotels alone, bored out of their minds when they're not playing or practicing? I'm going to bet money that someone's going to try and sneak someone into their hotel room. I mean, again, at the end of the day, we're all human here. Moving on to more basketball-related news. Dwight Howard, last night on CNN, has decided, announcing to Don Lemon, that he will be meeting his team in Orlando as planned. Let's go with the quote. Quote, I have a contractual obligation to my teammates, to my fans, to the Lakers, the organization, to everyone. But at the same time, I also have an obligation to my family and my community. So yes, I will be joining my team in Orlando, but during that time, we'll be getting a lot of work done here in Atlanta and around the nation as far as making sure people don't forget about us and what's going on in our communities, end quote. Beautifully put. And the best part is, and moving back a little bit, so Dwight Howard was 50-50 on the restart due to what's going on in the world with police brutality and institutional racism, as he should be. He should be standing up for his people and all the wronggoings that are going on in this country. And I know I've been very vocal on more recent episodes about what's going on, but I just feel like it's so simple. I think it's so simple to just treat others the way you would want to be treated and not really go off the color of their skin. But like Martin Luther King said, the content of their character. So the best part about Dwight Howard announcing he will be coming back is he's donating every single cent from his contract, all $700,000, to his charity, Breathe Again. So he's making a statement by going and playing and giving all his money for the greater good. And trust me, the Lakers need this man. He's averaging nearly 8 points, 8 rebounds a game on 73.2% shooting, a career high, on only 19 minutes a game. So with Howard, the Lakers have one of the best front courts in the NBA. And even aside from Howard, they still have Anthony Davis, LeBron in the front court, as well as JaVale McGee and Marcus Morris. But if Howard had decided not to opt out, they could have been in some serious trouble. First off, Anthony Davis prefers to play the 4 for whatever reason. He doesn't feel comfortable playing the 5, so that's an issue there. And then secondly, their starter, JaVale McGee, has only averaged 16.7 minutes per game. So by allowing Howard to come in, soak up 20 to 25 minutes a night, takes a lot of stress off the rest of the team. The Lakers are the front runners to make it to the finals, but not having Howard would have taken away a lot of unnecessary help on the glass, as well as a lot of rim running. And he's done a great job this year just playing his role, not being a distraction to the team, because I remember at the beginning, no team wanted him, and the Lakers got him at a bargain price. And the guy is still capable of putting up big numbers when he gets starters minute, but he has done a great job of just being a part of the team and doing what needs to be done. Typically, he gets posted up a lot from other teams he's played with, and I believe this year he's only been posted up a handful of times on the entire season. So he's really brought himself into this Lakers culture because he knows, yes, Dwight knows how much a championship will mean to his legacy. He's already a surefire Hall of Famer, a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, a player who once led a somewhat mediocre, slightly above mediocre Orlando team to the finals. So he's already got a great resume, but all he can do is add on to it here on out. So congrats to Dwight Howard for standing up for what is right by donating his salary to his charity and coming to Orlando to play for the Lakers. The team is probably very excited, and it's about to get interesting down there in Orlando. Moving on, next point, player who is now out, Bradley Beal, is now hurt, is now revealing that he has a shoulder rotator cuff injury that came into play at the beginning of the at the beginning of the shutdown of the season. So this just further depletes the East. So as you might have heard, 9 teams from the East will be participating in Orlando, while the West has 13 teams. So as of now, the Wizards sit 5.5 games out of the 8th seeded Orlando Magic. And at this point, should the Wizards even go to Orlando? They're already playing without Davis Bertans. John Wall has been out for the entire year. And now their best player, Bradley Beal, who's averaging 30.6 points per game, will not be participating in Orlando. Looking at it from the Wizards' perspective, it's been a great move. You get rest for Beal, your best player, It allows him to see other players and how they perform at his position. And really, what was the best case scenario from the Wizards making the playoffs? They're already a game and a half back from getting 4 games within that play-in seed. Best case scenario, they win the play-in games. They win the back-to-back games against the Magic or the Brooklyn Nets, who we'll get to in a second, are very much struggling as of now. And the best case scenario is they play the Bucks and they get rocked. So I think it's better for them. The Wizards made a good decision as an organization to rest Beal, gives them the chance to try out some other players and see where it goes. But seriously, should the Wizards even go to Orlando at this point? Good thing there's no fans, because the Beal was their only ticket into Orlando. And to be honest, maybe the whole team should just drop out at this point. Wouldn't that be a thing? Then what would even be the point of the East playing games? Because at that point, there's only 8 teams, and of course, only 8 teams make the playoffs. And I mean, at this point, the Wizards are 26-40. It's not like they had a great year or anything to ride home about. So I don't think anyone would really miss them if they didn't come to Orlando. If you take a look at their roster, they look like a very competitive G League All-Star team. And hey, again, no fans in the building, so no one's going to be too disappointed. No one's going to be disappointed that they missed the Wizards versus Nets game. And now, speaking on the Nets, Spencer Dinwiddie today has tested positive again for COVID, so he will be officially not joining the team in Orlando, along with DeAndre Jordan, along with Kyrie Irving, and also Kevin Durant, who's been out the entire year with an Achilles injury. So it's going to be interesting what happens now with the Nets, who, they're really running on their last fumes, as they're now missing arguably their 4 best players. And they sit now in the 7th seed. Orlando's now in the 8th seed. So this gives Orlando a good time to avoid the Bucks and set up a rematch with last year's semifinals between the Raptors and Orlando. So that should be interesting if we can get that matchup going again, because last year Orlando upset the Raptors in that first game, but then went on to lose 4 consecutive games. And now that the Raptors are without Kawhi, they might have themselves a fighting chance with a good front court with Nikola Vucevic and Aaron Gordon. But as I mentioned last week, the Raptors could surprise some people and make a second consecutive finals appearance. Only thing that's standing in their way is Giannis and the Bucks. But God, I'm just so excited to get basketball back in our households, because Jesus, it has been a boring couple months now. The only thing we got on TV is NASCAR and golf. First off, who likes NASCAR? That's a debate for another day. Moving on now, after this commercial break, we will be looking at the teams that did not make it to Orlando, and which of these teams, not including the Warriors, because, hey, we all know they're going to be good next year, that have the brightest future ahead of them. So stay tuned after this commercial break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
we're back now on the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And we just discussed some updates with Orlando, another team in the Sacramento Kings shutting down their practice facilities. And as teams prepare to head to Orlando for the restart of the NBA season, a lot of players have opted in, including Dwight Howard, and opted out in Spencer Dinwiddie. So moving on now. So 22 teams are going to Orlando, but there's 8 teams that were the unfortunates of not getting the invite. And those are the teams we are going to discuss now. And that includes the Golden State Warriors, the Cleveland Cavaliers, Minnesota Timberwolves, Atlanta Hawks, Detroit Pistons, New York Knicks, Chicago Bulls, and Charlotte Hornets. I want to look at the teams that I think are in the best position to make a leap next year. And I'm going to exclude the Golden State Warriors from this discussion. As you all know, Steph Curry, they basically put everything on snooze control this year. Steph Curry hurts himself in one of the first games of the season, breaks his hand, out for several months. Klay Thompson, as we know, got hurt in last year's NBA Finals, and then that left Draymond and the Young Bucks, and they finished with the NBA's worst record at 15-50. But we know next year they're going to come back healthy. They have the potential of getting the number 1 overall pick. They can use that along with Andrew Wiggins to trade for a established superstar, or they can use that pick on a James Wiseman or a LaMelo Ball. So they have a lot of options ahead of them, and I don't see them having any trouble in making the playoffs next year. But now we're going to discuss 3 teams that I think have the potential to make a leap in a positive direction, starting with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They finished the season at 19-46, and looking at the returnees, they have Kevin Love, Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, Larry Nance Jr., and Kevin Porter Jr. That gives them one of the best young backcourts in the NBA, with Sexton being only 21 and finishing at 20.8 points per game, 22nd in the league, actually, in scoring. Garland, will be 20, and Kevin Porter Jr., who is 20 as well. So that gives them a great young backcourt. They're all great scorers. None of them are that defensive-minded, so that's an issue there that I think, if you can't play defense in this league, you're not going to win a championship. It's as simple as that. The Warriors, although they were an offensive juggernaut, one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. The Lakers this year, strong defensively. The Bucks produced one of the best defensive teams in league history. So without defense, you're in trouble. But with Kevin Love, they do have one of the perfect stretch 5s in the NBA. Although he is getting up there in age, he will be 32 starting the season. He still brings a lot of promise, being able to stretch the floor, shoot threes at a very high percentage. And he's just a great guy to have in the locker room, although there was some controversy between him and the Cavs earlier this season. But I think that might be behind them, but who knows? They could be just happy shipping them to another team as well. Now, looking at their free agents, Andre Drummond has a player option, along with Tristan Thompson, who will be eligible for free agency. Drummond just announced, though, that he will exercise his $29.1 million player option. And why did he opt out? He didn't look that happy when he left Detroit. Here's his tweet, quote, "If there's one thing I learned about the NBA, there's no friends or loyalty. I've given my heart and soul to the Pistons, and to have this happen with no heads up makes me realize that this is just a business. I love you, Detroit, ... end quote." Not too happy there. He went on Dan Le Batard's podcast, told people that he didn't want to leave Cleveland on this note. Hey, he might mean that, but the other thing is he's not getting this kind of money on the open market. Since 2016, when he signed this contract, the direction of the way that the normal back-to-the-basket rebounding center has gone in the complete opposite direction. It is nearly extinct in a league that has gravitated toward small ball shooting and spacing. So, Andre, I appreciate you wanting to come back to Cleveland and show them that you can contribute to a playoff team, because I think Drummond playing the typical 5 with Kevin Love being a perfect stretch 4 can really, I think you guys can do some damage together. That by far one of the best rebounding front courts in the NBA, as Drummond has once again led the league in rebounding at over nearly 16 a game. So a lot of promise here in the front court. And looking now at their draft picks, they own the first one, surprisingly, because I thought LeBron shipped out every single draft pick they had until 2030. So they own the first pick, and they actually have tied for the highest percentage with the Warriors and the Timberwolves in landing that number one overall pick. So they're in a great place there. I think this team still needs to find their identity. And no offense to Sexton and Garland and Kevin Porter Jr., but you're not winning a title with two guards under 6'3" unless you're Steph Curry. But none of these guys are Steph Curry because nobody is Steph Curry. So Cleveland, they need to find out who they are as a team. They've been all over the place in the second era of the LeBron-less Cavs. And as I mentioned earlier, these guards just don't fit together. They're offensive scoring, not defensive minded. They might need to trade one of them. I think they need to bring in a couple more veteran presence along with Kevin Love and Andre Drummond. But and then back to that draft pick though, if they land that number one overall pick again, it will be the fifth time since 2003, which is by far more than any other team. Although Andre Drummond is a great center right now, he's only on a one-year deal, and he might not be worth the money moving forward. So with that pick, they could look at a James Wiseman to secure, which I think would be a great spot moving forward for this team, who, again, very guard-heavy. And I think with the right players around them, they can be a solid playoffs team. I don't see them making the finals again anytime soon, but that is one of my teams we should look out for in 2021. Moving on to the next team, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves. Finished the season 19-45. It's been a rough patch for the Timberwolves. They made only one playoff appearance in the last 16, 17 years. That was a first-round exit a couple years back, and they're looking to return some excellent players. Karl Anthony Towns, of course, is a superstar of the highest proportions, a guy who has even added another dimension to his game by averaging the fifth most threes per game in the entire league as a 7-footer, which makes him just very dynamic in today's game, along with D'Angelo Russell, who just signed a large contract with the Warriors and was traded mid-season, Jarrett Culver, and Josh Okogie. Pardon, my bad. So they have two of the youngest stars in Towns and Russell. But again, those guys need to learn, like I said about the Cavs, those guys need to learn how to play defense. Because we all know Russell can get the ball in the hoop, but in terms of on the defensive end, he's always been known as an average, if not below average defender. Aside from Russell, they also acquired Malik Beasley near the trade deadline. He is set to be a restricted free agent. I don't see them letting him walk after acquiring him in a trade to bring him over. So I see him being an extra piece to this team. Juan Herman Gomez, who was also acquired in a trade with the Denver Nuggets. So this team the Timberwolves have been one of the more interesting teams in the league the last several years, bringing in a lot of talented draft picks, but not panning out in many playoff appearances with the likes of Andrew Wiggins, Tyus Jones, Karl Anthony Towns, along with many others. So they haven't really seemed to be able to put it together. They hired Tim Thibodeau as their coach in order to bring in a defensive presence. That backfired. He was fired. So really, I don't know what this team... At this point, Karl Anthony Towns has been in the league several years, and eventually we're gonna need to find out, can this guy be a normal playoff fixture year after year? And so far, he hasn't shown that. The team's limited on shooters, and they need to look for one in this draft where they do own their first pick along with Brooklyn's lottery protected pick, which unless Brooklyn really fucks up in Orlando, I don't see them keeping that pick. So they do own their own first, which can't be worse than 7th, and they do, along with the Golden State Warriors and the Cavs, they do hold max 14% odds of winning the lottery, which this team could really use a player like a LaMelo Ball, someone who can stretch the floor, play a backup point guard to D'Angelo Russell, and could be a long-time fixture for this team. I think what this team needs more than anything is D'Angelo Russell was acquired midway through the season. I think we need to give this team more time together. So when the season starts, we'll see the experiment of Russell and Towns playing together, as they are two of the best young stars under the age of 25. And I think together they can do a lot of damage and can, even in a very tough West, can get into that playoff bubble. We'll wait and see. Another disappointing season, but things are looking bright on the horizon for this team. Moving on to my last team to look forward to, and that is the Atlanta Hawks. And they're returning Trae Young, Clint Capella, who was acquired in a trade mid-season from the Houston Rockets, John Collins, Cam Reddish, Kevin Huerter, and DeAndre Hunter. So one of the most exciting young squads in the NBA. Trae Young is one of the biggest superstars in the world right now. As I mentioned on the podcast last week, his agent just went from Octagon to Clutch Sports. So now there's already rumors swirling that he might end up in LA with LeBron. But for the time being, he's on a rookie contract. And after that, he will be a restricted free agent. So the Atlanta Hawks at least have him for the next couple, if not several years. So nothing to worry about there. Then they have John Collins, missed 25 games to begin the season due to a drug steroid suspension. So they missed him for the first 25 games. So that was already off to a rough start. And now with the addition of Clint Capella, they have a legitimate center for an entire season, along with their backup, Edmond. So they do have a good combination of young talent, Cam Reddish, Kevin Huerter, who are both great shooters. And we all know that's what you need in today's NBA is shooting and guys who are able to switch and guard multiple positions, the two keys to basketball in the year 2020. So one thing they are missing, especially now with the retirement of Vince Carter, so all salutes to Vince Carter and his amazing 22-year career and NBA record. They are missing the veteran presence that you need for a team to make that leap into the playoffs. So in terms of free agents, their only player they're looking to lose possibly is Jeff Teague, who would be a solid backup to Trae Young, but I think at this time in his career, Jeff Teague can still be a solid starting point guard. But really what we're looking at with this team is Trae Young, just a bad team, good stats player, a la Devin Booker, or can this guy push a team by himself into the playoffs? We all know the amazing passing, the scoring prowess, but the guy's a negative on defense. Possibly one of the worst defenders in the entire NBA. And already starting there, it's already 4-on-5. With a defender similar to an Isaiah Thomas, not senior, but junior, we're looking at someone where you're already at a disadvantage every time you step on the court. As good as he is offensively, what he does defensively negates his scoring ability. So it's going to be interesting how, with a center like Clint Capella, who might be able to cover up some of his errors, because a lot of players are going to zoom by Trae Young, but at least he has someone protecting the rim in Clint Capella, and hopefully that will keep Capella more inside rather than outside on the perimeter, where we all know it negates his effectiveness as a defender. So next year it's going to be a big season for the Atlanta Hawks. Are they ready for the playoffs? I think they can be with the right veteran presence, and they only have $57 million guaranteed in contracts to 8 players, so that gives them plenty of room to sign some veteran presence for this locker room to teach these guys how to win in the NBA, how to be professionals. They have the young talent, but they need the discipline now. And lastly, probably the biggest off-season question for this team, do they extend John Collins? He's set to be a restricted free agent after the 2021 season. Do they extend him now so they don't have to do it later on? Or do they wait? Do they see how he fits with Clint Capella? Maybe they aren't a good fit together, as neither John Collins nor Clint Capella are great three-point shooters. So maybe we wait to see how they mesh together once the season starts before they look into extending him, because he still presents a good amount of trade value on the market, so he could be a good trade asset later on. That's all I have for you guys right now. Again, my teams to look for starting next season. Cleveland Cavaliers, Minnesota Timberwolves, and Atlanta Hawks, and of course, Golden State Warriors. But like I said, they won't have a problem making the playoffs. After this segment, we will be talking about the only basketball going on in the country right now, and that is the TBT, the basketball tournament. I'll be talking about the history of the tournament as well as my own personal shot at forming a team for the TBT. So stay with us now after these commercial breaks.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we're back, and I got to start thinking of something new to say every time we come back into a segment here, but problem for another day. So here we are, Nick Robin. We just discussed the 8 teams that didn't get the invite to the big dance in Orlando, and which of them have the brightest futures ahead of them. Again, repeat: Cleveland, Atlanta, and Minnesota. So moving on now, we are going to talk about the only basketball in the world actually currently going on, and that is the TBT, standing for the basketball tournament being played right now in Columbus, Ohio. So what is the TBT? It's an open application, March Madness style, single elimination basketball tournament featuring college alumnus, broadcast on ESPN. So in 2014, Jonathan Muger and Dan Friel said, hey, I want to see March Madness, but I want to see it in the summer with former college players, giving them a second chance at eternal glory. And the best part is, the winning team gets $1 million. Not $1 million per person, but $1 million that they split with everyone else on the team. Pretty crazy concept, pretty cool concept if you ask me. So over the years, they've featured alumnus teams from Ohio State, Syracuse, Marquette, Dayton, West Virginia, Illinois, Clemson, and Purdue. Similar to March Madness, there's 8 regions with each regional hosted by one of the participating teams. So and the best part about it is there's a charitable cause for it. So each team selects their own charitable organization that they will benefit with part of their winnings. So one team is donating money to ALS, another team to Black Lives Matter, and so on and so forth. Another one to cancel research. So it's not only is it exciting and fun, but it's for a great cause as well. So typically it's a 64-team tournament. There's even been one year where they had 97 teams. But this year, due to COVID, 24 teams, and it's a fully quarantined tournament in Columbus, Ohio over the next 10 days. It started on July 4th. Probably not the best day to start something because I don't think anyone's inside watching anything. But yeah, it started July 4th. And the top 8 seeds received first-round byes. And before the tournament began, each player had to pass a COVID test 5 different times. Pretty crazy stuff that we're living in. One of the things, though, that about the TBT tournament that's very just unique is that at the end of each game, and in 2018, regular March Madness, the one that's actually in March, adopted this fad, which is at the conclusion of each game, the winning team advances its placard on a giant bracket to the next round. So they go up, they remove the placard, and put it advance it themselves to the next round. Very cool moment. It's kind of a knockoff of the All Valley Karate Tournament bracket found in the Karate Kid. So love seeing the pop culture aspect to the basketball tournament. Great move, guys. So over the years, Jason Williams has participated, Mike Bibby, Matt Bonner, Brian Scalabrine, along with Greg Oden, returned to the basketball court for the first time since 2014-2015 when he participated in the 2018 basketball tournament. Over the years, a lot of players have been boosters for the team, such as CP3 and DeMarcus Cousins. So a lot of NBA involvement goes on in this tournament, although most of the players that participate are either played in the league on a 10-day contract, maybe had a couple of year stints. Joe Johnson's even participated in the past. But most of the players come from the EuroLeague, the CBA, the Italian Basketball League, and all the other professional leagues in the world. And some players have even used this as a launching pad to get back into the NBA. So the rules are pretty similar onto that now. So games are played in 9-minute quarters instead of the 20-minute halves we see in college or the 10-minute quarters that we see in women's college basketball. And then instead of getting 5 fouls, players get 6 fouls before disqualification. And another thing that they do is they go off the FIBA rules where 2 free throws are granted on the 5th and every subsequent foul, non-shooting foul, by the defense in a quarter. So a lot of ways to score points. And then my favorite part of the basketball tournament has to be the adoption of the ELAM ending for all games, which means no overtime. So at the stoppage point, under 4 minutes, at the first stoppage at under 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, the game clock stops and a target score is now set. So the winning team, for example, let's say the score is 55-50. The winning team will now have to score 63 points. Either team will have to score 63 points to win the game. I love this rule because it just adds so much drama, so much anticipation, strategy to the game. So now back to that free throw rule. So now instead of getting 2 free throws, the non-fouling team will get 1 free throw and will retain possession of the basketball. So it makes things a little bit interesting. So it's less likely that a team will win on a made free throw. Because, I mean, no one wants to see that. We saw it in the All-Star game this year, but it's so lame when the game is over on a free throw. I mean, seriously, what a terrible way for a game to end. You play so hard for, in this case, 36 minutes just for your team to lose because the other team made a free throw. So by eliminating that extra free throw, there's less likely of a chance that the winning team will win, that the team that wins will win on a free throw. So that's good that they were able to make that adjustment. So the tournament's currently going on. Watched a couple games today on ESPN, but now I'm going to go into a little personal story. So back in 2016, so I worked for the men's basketball team at San Diego State for 4 years, became very close to the program, got to know a lot of the players, got to sit courtside for a lot of great games at Vias Arena. By far the best sports experience in San Diego since the Chargers went up north and the Padres haven't made the playoffs in over a decade. So, yeah, I worked there under future Hall of Fame coach Steve Fisher. And in my time there, I was able to build some great connections. So in 2016, I reached out to Dan Friel, again, the other co-founder of the basketball tournament. I wanted to ask him how you had to go about setting up a team for this tournament, and he explained to me how it worked, about how getting the fan votes, because basically you have to be nominated to be in this tournament by your fan base. And since SDSU basketball, I'd say, has a pretty good fan base, not just in San Diego, but regionally on the West Coast, that wasn't going to be an issue. The hard part was getting all the players together. So I spoke with some of my fellow managers, asked them if any of them were interested in helping me set this up. And from there, I constructed a PowerPoint explaining how the tournament worked, hit up our director of basketball operations at San Diego State, came into practice, wore a nice little suit, presented this to him, wanted to at least either see if they wanted to participate, because, I mean, the great thing about the TBT is it's get great exposure for your college program. Players, high school players, are going to be watching the TBT on TV, because, I mean, most of these guys are basketball junkies, so watch any guys playing basketball on ESPN. So great exposure for the program, and really could get us to a level where we can finally maybe compete to get these 5-star recruits year in and year out. So I go in, I give my presentation. I don't think they wanted any participation, or they didn't really want to participate with it, because it's something like, I don't think anyone from the program currently is able to coach or do anything of that nature. So I went in, gave my spiel, started reaching out to boosters from our program, and kindly was told to F off by a couple of them. And hey, one of them actually did say I reminded them a lot of a young Jerry Colangelo, which is probably one of the nicest things you can ever hear. I mean, because the guy created Team USA basketball. But that's moving on. SDSU, I mean, honestly, SDSU could put together a very competitive squad that I think could beat anyone in the country. And I wasn't in it for the money. I wanted to just, I'm always about resume builders. And I thought this was a great way, a great story to tell, to put on your resume. So I started reaching out to players, and really outside of Kawhi Leonard, we don't really have any players that are significant in the NBA, but we have a lot of players that are really good in their respective professional leagues, whether it's in Europe or China. So I started going through old players, and we have a Jamal Franklin, who was 2010 11 Mountain West Player of the Year and one of the best players in the CBA. He almost averaged nearly a triple-double, not just a triple-double, averaging 30 points per game with over 10 assists and 10 rebounds in the CBA. And we have, aside from him, we have Xavier Thames, who is the 2013-14 Mountain West Player of the Year and led our 2014 squad to the Sweet 16. And we were, if anyone remembers, we were leading Arizona 61-52 with about 9 minutes left to go. And then Nick Johnson, who didn't do jack shit in the NBA, comes to the line and sinks. I think he goes 10 of 10 from the line. I remember sitting in the stands having a chemistry test the next day. I'm just sitting being like, God damn it, got to drive all the way back to Anaheim, right? Or I have to drive all the way from Anaheim back to my place at San Diego State, stay up till 5 a.m. in the morning, and I'm pretty sure I ended up like getting a D on my chemistry final or midterm, whatever. So, hey, again, going on another tangent there. So, along with that, we had Trey Kell, great three-point shooter and big 6'4", shooting guard, combo guard. Dakari Allen, 6'6", lanky defender. J.J. O'Brien, one of the smartest players in my 4 years at San Diego State. Skylar Spencer, the all-time SDSU blocks leader in San Diego State basketball history. And then Deshaun Stevens and Malcolm Thomas, who are actually playing in this year's tournament for Team ALS. And Billy White. So we had a great team of combination of great guards along with formidable front court players. And the good thing about this team is these players did not peak in college. They continued to work, and over time they got even better. But at the end of the day, there wasn't enough care from the players to really get this off the ground. So I'm over here texting guys and shooting texts, calling these guys, and honestly, half of the, I'd say 3 or 4 guys on that list don't even know who the hell I am. And to be honest, the other guys that I worked alongside, I don't even know if some of them even remember my name, but I just remember being so adamant about this, and I thought this was a great way to get San Diego State further on the map nationally. I mean, we might not have the same pedigree as the Dukes of the world, the UNCs, but SDSU is a great program, and honestly, we had a shot at winning that $1 million. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. I tried briefly again this year, but after COVID hit, it kind of looked like a lost cause, especially with only 24 teams being in the tournament this year rather than 64. So that's my spiel, guys. The TBT, the basketball tournament, watch it on ESPN. Great basketball, not NBA level, but a lot of guys who, and that's the thing, a lot of these guys, you see them and you're like, how is this guy not in the league? How is that guy not in the league? That just shows how hard it is to make it to the NBA, because you have guys who are 6'5", 6'6", point guards, can shoot lights out, defend any position, and they're just not good enough to get to that level. Again, at the end of the day, there's only 450 guys around that can call themselves members of the National Basketball Association. So I definitely recommend tuning in. This Elite 8 will be later this week, so take some time. We got nothing else going on, and watch some great basketball. So moving forward to our last segment, Nick's Picks, we are going down greatest rappers of all time. So get ready. I'll see you guys after this commercial break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back, and we just broke down the TBT, the basketball tournament, currently playing on ESPN, and discussed my shot and attempt at creating a TBT team for SDSU. Unfortunately, I fell short, but nevertheless, there's always next year. Now, moving on to America's favorite segment, Nick's Picks. And today, I am breaking down the greatest rappers of all time. And this is where it gets kind of tricky, because how do you really quantify how good a rapper is? It's not like, I mean, I guess we have Grammys to how many Grammys someone's won, but that kind of shit that's bullshit. It's just popular vote, what's mainstream, what people are listening to. That doesn't really get into the grit and the grind of what rap is and what it represents, because the Grammys weren't big decades ago, so we can't really go off that. But it's not like basketball where we can see like how many points did Notorious B.I.G. score in his career, or how many points did Dr. Dre have. So there's not really a real system of really rating something like art, because you can't really rate art. It's opinionated. So like most of these lists, what I'm about to get into is my own personal opinion. So if you have any complaints, please feel free to share them on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or wherever you can find the GSMC Podcast Network. Be more than happy to answer any questions, finish off any debates that you might have for me. So again, this is my personal opinion on the greatest rappers of all time. My ranking criteria, we went with accolades, but again, Grammys are kind of BS. Doesn't really prove how significant, how important, or how great a rapper is. Impact and legacy, and then lyricism. So starting with my honorable mentions, Kendrick Lamar, and I just said it was bullshit, but he does have 13 Grammys and the most nominations in a single night for a rapper with 11. Esquire UK was quoted in saying he is the greatest rapper making music today. And to top it off, he won the Pulitzer Prize for music. That just shows how much people's minds have changed about rap, because for a long time people didn't even think that was music. But the fact that he won the Pulitzer Prize for music is very significant. So Kendrick Lamar is my first honorable mention. And then next, this guy did a lot of great things on the production side. And if this was who is the greatest guy behind the scenes as well as rapper, he'd be at the top of the list. He also created Beats by Dre, and that is Dr. Dre. And as I mentioned, as a producer, he's the greatest of all time, but as a rapper alone, he stands right outside the top 5. He started with NWA, along with Ice Cube and Eazy-E and MC Ren, and blew up that way. Then went solo, came out with one of the greatest rap albums of all time in Nothing But a G Thing. And he brought many rappers to prominence, including Kendrick Lamar, The Game, Eminem, and many more. So Dr. Dre has an everlasting impact on the rap game. And he even founded the guy we just mentioned in Kendrick Lamar. So kudos to Dr. Dre. You're right outside my top 5. Now we start with Nick's picks and greatest rappers of all time. And I'm starting with someone who's been deceased for the last 20 plus years, and that is Tupac Shakur. According to music journalist Chuck Phillips, the dead artist has helped achieve rap from a crude street fad to a complex art form, setting the stage for the current global hip-hop phenomenon, end quote. So he's did so much in that. Songs, he rapped about the real life going on in the streets, from Changes to Brenda's Got a Baby. And the fact that he's been on for so long, there was a whole conspiracy theory that he was still alive, going under the name Machiavelli, and that he was living in Tahiti or some other island in the middle of nowhere. Unfortunately, that's not true. We did see him reappear at Coachella a couple years back, and what really started the trend of these big holograms. So yeah, Tupac Shakur, number 5. Next up, his brother in the rap game. Were once brothers, now enemies. Notorious B.I.G., deemed the savior of East Coast hip hop. Rolling Stone has referred to him as the greatest rapper that ever lived. And again, guys such as Tupac, Notorious B.I.G., they were only on this earth for so long, but the fact that we're still talking about them today in the year 2020, 23 and 24 years after these two guys have passed, unfortunately, 2 murder cases that are still unsolved, but it just shows how much impact they had on the short time that they were on this earth. And similar to Tupac, Notorious B.I.G., his lyrics are still being used today. In 2009, they came out with the movie Notorious. I was so jacked up for that movie. Unfortunately, it wasn't too great until Straight Outta Compton came around, and that was really how you do a good biopic. And I think where they went wrong was they could have chosen someone else to play Notorious B.I.G. They chose Jamal Woodward. I think it would have been better if they chose Sean Kingston, someone who Jamal Woodward is is a rapper, but I think Sean Kingston could have even given a better performance. Unfortunately, we'll never know. So, number 5, Tupac Shakur. Number 4, Notorious B.I.G. Number 3, we have Nas, known as one of the greatest lyricists of all time. His debut album, Illmatic, is still considered one of the greatest rap albums of all time. And seriously, where do you go from there, where your first ever album is considered one of the greatest? All you can go is down from there. A lot of people gave him grief that his next several albums weren't as good. But I think he just set the bar so high that he kind of limited himself to this criticism. So not only is Nas one of the greatest rappers alive, but he also is one of the greatest rap feuds ever with the next guy on my list, Jay-Z. And he, going back to Nas one last time, he ended the rap feud with one of the greatest diss tracks of all time in Ether. So definitely check that out. And now, number 2, Jay-Z, from drug dealer to one of the greatest rappers and wealthiest couples in the world, aka Beyonce. Jay-Z, there's so much you can say, but one thing I do want to point out is one of his newer songs, The Story of OJ. And I think the fact that he talked about a sensitive subject, and if you watch the music video, it's a very strong graphical images of how we still live in this era of what we deem as institutional racism here in America, and he really points that out in this music video. And I think it had a very powerful message, and the fact that someone like O.J. Simpson didn't want to speak out on things like this, on things of race, even though he was one of the most prominent black athletes in the world, and For a lot of people that don't know, he was one of the first African Americans to be in a major commercial for Hertz. So I think he points out a lot of issues that we still have wrong in America, and we can see right now the current climate we're in. But Jay-Z, someone who really started at the bottom and has now lived this amazing life. He's not only a great rapper, but one of the best businessmen, being a part owner of the Brooklyn Nets, starting his own agency, Rock Nation. So he's really done a lot for his career outside of just rapping, but still he's in that conversation for greatest rapper of all time. And lastly, my personal favorite, and I also think the greatest rapper of all time, the greatest lyricist, the stuff he raps is just unheard of, and nobody wants to fuck with the white guy. And that is Eminem. Movie made about his life, won an Oscar for Best Original Song. I used to have 500 songs on my iPod, 80 of them, nearly 20% for Eminem songs. And outside of that, great diss track artist. Just look at what he did to Machine Gun Kelly a couple years ago. The guy's 50 years old, and he's still on top. And it doesn't just stop there. Eminem means so much to my childhood, growing up as a teenager, even into young adulthood. Like when I was angry, when I was upset, when someone pissed me off, I just throw on my earphones, pop in some angry Eminem music, and just vibe out. I even made one of my AI names, Shake That 445, in honor of, still to this day, one of my favorite songs of all time in Shake That. Crazy music video. You got to go check it out. So yes, Eminem is number one on my list of greatest rappers of all time. If you have any complaints, again, it's my list, not yours, but please feel free to reach out. Always love a good debate. Looking back now, honorable mentions, Dr. Dre, Kendrick Lamar, and my top 5, Tupac Shakur, Notorious B.I.G., Nas, Jay-Z, and Eminem. So I want to end this show with a little self-reflection on Friday. I turned 27 years old, and honestly, it freaks me out a little bit, especially with everything going on in the world. And I don't know, at 27, I didn't know where I was going to be. I thought, honestly, I might be married at this point. But as another year passes by, I think it gives me some time to reflect and I'm someone who stresses a lot about a lot of different things, like all the time. If anyone knows me well, they know that Nick Robin is just always stressing out, and it always looks like his head's about to explode. But I think during this quarantine time, during this shutdown in the world, I've just realized that you can't really put a number on anything in terms of age of, hey, you need to be married at this time, you need to have your shit together at this age. And really, I've tried to incorporate this into my life, that we all have our own past, and we all figure out things, some sooner for others and other times later. But again, we're all on different paths. There's not one cookie cutter way to do anything in life. But yeah, just coming on to another year, I'm in a great spot. I've been lucky enough to get this opportunity to work for GSMC Podcast Network as a basketball podcast host. Something that I've always wanted to do was try podcasting. Didn't know if it was for me, but I'm just trying to get better every episode. So I appreciate you guys. For anyone out there who's listening, thank you as always for taking time to listen to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. And I just hope you guys will continue to listen over the next several months, and we'll see where this goes. So again, birthday's on Friday. Looking to take it easy for this year for once, because it's funny. I feel like the older you get, the less exciting birthdays become, and it's just honestly just another year. But I'm looking forward to what 27 provides. So thank you as always for listening to GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review, because that really helps us out. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we'd really appreciate that. Thank you, and have a great night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.